morning. Welcome to GW. Thank you for joining the North Korean Economic Forum's annual conference. I'm Yeon-ho Kim, the Associate Director of the GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIX. Today is the second day of the North Korea Economic Forum's annual conference on the North Korean economy in a changing global order. Yesterday, we explored North Korea's regional economic development and inflation trends since the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we'll focus on North Korea's defense industries and the evolving North Korea-Russia relations. But first, we have a keynote speech by Ambassador Kent Herstedt. The session will be moderated by Rachel Min-young Lee, co-chair of the North Korea Economic Forum. She is sharing the crown with Troy at Wilson Center starting today. Rachel?
Today, I have the honor of introducing a special guest who will share his firsthand experience in and insights from dealing with North Korea. Ambassador Kent Herstedt is currently a senior advisor at CMI Marty Tisari Peace Foundation and a non-resident senior fellow at the National University of Singapore. During his 25-plus-year career in the Swedish government, he held numerous distinguished positions, including Ambassador of Sweden to Singapore, Chairperson in Office of Special Envoy for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the Swedish Government Special Envoy for the Korean Peninsula. Ambassador Herstedt, the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Dear students, researchers, and audience, whether in DC or online, it's my great pleasure to address you all today. Rachel has been very strict to me and said that I only have 30 minutes, so I really have to keep track of time. I'm actually addressing you from a walk I'm doing in northern Spain, in an area called Galicia, known for its seafood and beautiful nature, but not these days. It's raining heavily, so I actually was very pleased to come into a hotel room to be able to address you from here. But that's also why I'm quite plainly dressed. I have no place in my backpack for neither a suit or a tie, so I hope you accept my plain outfit. However, I would like to express my gratitude to George Washington University, its Korea Studies program, and also to you, Rachel, co-chair, for inviting me to speak today. I will try to share a little bit about my experience. My first trip to North Korea was over, soon. It's 28 years ago. And since then, I've been to North Korea probably 25 times, about 25 times. I actually came to North Korea before I came to South Korea, which I think it's quite rare. I have worked under very many different hats in my engagement with North Korea. It started with humanitarian aid in various forms through UNICEF, and I'm mentioning my different hats because I think it really built up my ability to work with North Korea, to see different parts of the North Korean society. So beginning with humanitarian work, later on political work, and lately, as Rachel said, I worked 7 years as special envoy to the Korean Peninsula. And it's important to say Korean Peninsula, actually, because I think it's a matter of showing that you really care for the whole of the Korean Peninsula, and you are not a special envoy just to address or deal with North Korea. So that was very important for me when I actually accepted this position from my then foreign minister. During this period of time, and I would like to start there, we have no time to talk about all these decades I have been working with North Korea or for different causes on the Korean Peninsula. But I would like to start by saying a few words about the last 7-8 years, because I think the period of time before the pandemic and that stand we actually got during that period of time where North Korea was closed is quite important to reflect upon in a context. So that's why I will start by speaking a little bit about that intense period that was there before the pandemic, and then continue with what we see now, and then also, of course, where we are heading. There's a few things I want to say. To build up trust in very difficult environments, like, for example, North Korea, is something very difficult and complicated and take long time. And that's why I rarely speak. I rarely do interviews. I try to be very selective. But I think right now we are in a situation where we need to have that kind of dialogue between we who have had that kind of interaction, track one or others, that we actually have this kind of exchange with scholars and experts, academics and others. It's very important that we help each other to get the full picture of things. Many of those who are true experts in various parts of, whether it's North Korean economy or whether it's history or whether it's politics, I think we only fully get the full picture if we also get some of the sentiments of the dialogue. So I really think that is important to have this kind of opportunity to both address you, but also to have Q&A and help each other to deepen our understanding. But of course, my role, as it has been, also have restrictions. It's a very difficult path to walk when you have been working as special envoy. In that sense, maybe sometimes you're mediator, or you're a trust builder, or whether you're a facilitator. That's very tricky business and very sensitive business. So that's why I think it's worthwhile to share a little bit about that experience. So for me, this more intense part as working on track one started 2017, and I think we all remember that was actually the starting point for a quite intense period, and it was a year that we had very harsh words sent in the direction between US and North Korea, and we all remember how then President Trump addressed this issue in the United Nations, and also all the tests that was done from the North Korean side. So it was really a vicious circle of escalation. And it's interesting and important, I think, to reflect upon that period of time of escalation and think about the time we live right now, where we also have a situation where we have an illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine that actually have direct connection both to Iran and to North Korea. And we have a very violent situation in the Middle East, more or less a de facto war between many different parties. And what I see in the world right now is a situation where the threshold for using violence is lower than any time I can remember. And that's why it is important to do efforts to try to de-escalate and try to create an understanding on where we can go next to also avoid that kind of developments also in Northeast Asia. So today, many actors think that you can achieve progress, gains, and benefits by using violence, and using violence as a tool to reach objectives, as I said, do not seem to have the same price as before. And many are worried that this notion might spread to other places in the world, and maybe to Northeast Asia and the Korean Peninsula. I will share some of my experience, as I said, starting in January 2017, and mentioned President Trump was inaugurated. Later that spring, North Korea conducted several missile and nuclear tests that surprised the world, including the US, especially in the speed in which North Korea progressed in their nuclear development, creating questions amongst many diplomats, experts, and others. How was this even possible that the speed of development happened like that? This development was perceived as a growing threat and big provocation. And the test was condemned by the United Nations and other international actors. I know you all know those things, but it's interesting just to remember that how tough that period of time was. So we had a time of very harsh words, 2017. Then I think we went into a period I would call the summit season, because there was a change and there opened up an opportunity between the US and North Korea. And I have no time to go into depth, but for us who during this period of time saw the changes in the North Korean society, when that kind of engagement started, and later it led to the Singapore summit. At the same time, many other summits between President Moon in South Korea, with Xi Jinping, with Putin, etc. During this time of engagement, what I call summit season, we could also see how that actually changed in the North Korean society. So when people think that this would be a possibility that maybe Trump too would be elected, and that this opportunity would be there again, and maybe those ambitions would be there to take up that kind of engagement, I would say that would be very difficult. That would be very difficult. During all the years I traveled to North Korea, I mean, more or less everything you have seen, everything you've been part of, the society being mobilized against the United States. And to change that, and it really changed dramatically during that period of time of engagement. That meant that all those posters and all those propaganda against the United States was taken away. I have said in interviews before that took a lot of bravery from both President Trump and from Kim Jong-un to actually make that steps, both in Panmunjom and in the Singapore summit. So Sweden and me as a special envoy, we are of course very well aware we are not one of the main players here. We are giving support and trying to use our leverage during this period of time to support direct talks. And for us, it was important not to try to dress ourselves as mediators, because we would like to see direct talks between the United States and North Korea, direct talks between North and South Korea. And what we tried to be was facilitators to support that direction. And that is actually what we did. And that is what my work were. So I traveled to all the capitals, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, many times to Pyongyang, to Seoul, of course, to Washington, to work with this during these years. And I felt that there really was an opportunity to do a lot. I must say, for me, it served me very well that I've been so many times to Pyongyang before, that I know many in the leadership also today. I know them well, and that we have been able to talked before and met many times before. I think this is many times one of the shortcomings in the Western world, and whether it's United Nations or whether it's other Asian countries dealing with North Korea, that we many times have rotation, many times. It's very much part of our systems, while many times the players on the North Korean side are still there. They can have 1 or 2 or 3 special envoys. They can have different representatives while our societies change. And that makes it very difficult for us to over time, understand and deal with North Korea in direct action of dialogue, because we have to build our competence one by one, again and again. And I many times have mentioned that as one of the problems. Another problem is that we don't maybe understand all the tools that North Korea use. They also use tools that we in the Western world might not always be able to afford to have. For example, time. I know one of my friends who was a negotiator with the Taliban in Afghanistan. He at one time discussed with some Taliban leaders in negotiations there, and the Taliban told him, "You have watches, we have time." And I think that's a quite interesting reflection. Sometimes I feel that when North Korea might not be too happy with the government or a minister or something else, they know what after a certain time that person or that government will change. So they can wait out the government or wait out a minister. They know at some point that person will not be there in that position. Another thing that I feel, and I think here is, and I'm now moving over to, I realize there's many things to say, but I now move over to where we are right now. So before the pandemic, there was a lot of engagement with North Korea. I felt that there was a lot of benefits by all the meetings, even if they were described in international media as failures, and maybe even themselves, participants felt that they were failures. I wouldn't say so. And I discussed this many times with the US Special Representative, Mr. Steve Biegun, and we have discussed this over time, that this is investments to create an understanding after 70 years of antagonism and even hatred from some parts. It takes time to change that. And all those times in negotiations, and I have been hosting some of them, I have been present in Hanoi, of course not in the meeting rooms, but I knew the people in both the North Korean and some in the US delegation. I seen firsthand how things can go wrong, and it's complex, and I have seen many pointing in various directions, but there is also basic things that we need to work with. For example, things that I haven't seen being discussed so much is when you come to negotiations, how are you mandated? Are the people on both sides mandated the same way? In the working meetings in Hanoi, obviously they were not, because on the US side, they were fully mandated to negotiate about denuclearization, while on the North Korean side, they were not. The only one who was allowed to have that side of the conversation, it was Kim Jong-un himself. So here, negotiation can go wrong because they are differently mandated, different expectations, and more issues also of this kind. So I think there's a lot to do about that. Another thing is expectations. When you come to meetings, what kind of expectations is there? What are you there to achieve? I was, on behalf of the Swedish government, the facilitator for the working group meeting between North Korea and the United States in October 19. I was not part in the meeting room. I'm not a part of this, but I was the facilitator and met both the delegations. And here it's clear that the expectations was something different from the North Korean side than the US side. Afterwards, the two delegations described the situation totally differently. The North Korean side saw it as a failure, while the United States said it was a good start of something that could be a process. So it's a matter also about expectations. So it's all from the big issues down to very detailed issues about how to make progress in negotiations between the US and North Korea. So where are we now? We all know we went into the pandemic. I was so frustrated about the pandemic. I thought 2019 was a very interesting year in engaging with North Korea, together with North Korea and other parties. And I know that even if the working meeting between North Korea and the US in October 19 was considered a failure, especially from the North Korean side, by no means we did not think that this would have chances to continue in the spring of 2020. So when the pandemic erupted in COVID-19 in February 2020, I think for this, it couldn't have come for a worse time. So by that, as we all know, North Korea closed its borders, and later even China. And during that period of time, I think there was a long period of self-reflection from the North Korean side. Coming out on the other side, slowly, we also had now the situation with the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine. And the relation between North Korea and Russia, I must say over time, I know firsthand that North Korea have really, after the Soviet Union, the fall of the Soviet Union, not been very impressed. They thought it was a weak Russia coming out of the Soviet Union that has abandoned the ideology and also in general terms was weak. That notion have changed during the Putin era. Today they see again a strong Russia and something they can relate to as something they can work with. So I'm not surprised that what have happened here after the pandemic, that actually North Korea and Russia have found an opportunity, what I would yet call a transactional relationship, where both sides need what the other can offer. And I think it's much broader than we really have a sense of today. However, I don't believe that this necessarily is a marriage in all senses. It's rather a good working relation where they actually can help each other. One thing, since I'm following many of the seminars in the US, is not mentioned too much, is a factor that I think will be quite important if this kind of intensity and a new whatever administration that will come after the election in November in the US, if they want to deal with some kind of engagement with North Korea, I don't think this will go away soon. I think that tight relationship with Russia will last for quite some time, but not forever. And I think the factor here is how long the war on Ukraine will go on. Because here is really what Russia so intensely needs from North Korea, and we hear different news about how much they are providing of artillery, ammunition, etc. from the North Korean side. And I think that that is one thing. The second thing is many of us are turning to China as an actor that we think and hope could help us influence North Korea in any direction. I'm not so sure it will be so easy, and I don't even know exactly what we hope China can do. However, China do have the leverage. We should remember that China have 95% of the trade with North Korea, and they provide energy and they provide other things to North Korea. So, of course, and they have more knowledge than many of us, most of us. And finally, the third thing, two more things. We also see, of course, now after the pandemic, Russia, we have a lower intensity in relation with China. We have, of course, the dramatic change of relation to South Korea. Here, I would like to say that I'm not that concerned that that this intensity and how this symbolically now are shown by tearing down buildings and now bridges and roads and all of that. I think it's part of another skill that North Korea really have. It's to build up suppression, to build up pressure. And I think that's another skill they have that many other actors do not use. And finally, one thing that me as a European also, of course, especially observing is how slow it's been with North Korean re-engagement with Europe. And I don't really see that this will change soon. Yes, 2 Swedish diplomats have returned, and I hear that another country might be in pipeline soon. But North Korea is definitely focusing in other directions of friendly and anti-imperialist countries, etc. And also, I think they have a special interest in Southeast Asia. So I think these are the significant directions I have seen. And finally, I think to return to dialogue about the nuclearization is very, very far away. I think the ambition now needs to be to try to lower the tension in Northeast Asia and on the Korean Peninsula. I think that is maybe a more realistic ambition. I also think that North Korea will, during the coming 6 months, start to open up a little bit more. I think there will be more of travels out and into North Korea. That gives us also more opportunities to share other notions with North Korea. So I think there will be some opportunities, but I think North Korea feel very comfortable with their game plan right now, even if I'm sure they know it will not last forever. But I think I will stop here. I think there will be questions also. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kent. For those of us who are used to hearing US and South Korean narratives about North Korea, I think it was refreshing to get a European perspective about engagement with North Korea in the years 2018 and 2019. North Korea's current foreign policy and prospects of Pyongyang's re-engagement with the West. You've covered a lot of ground about the various aspects of engagement, negotiations with North Korea, and Pyongyang's stance on the US, China, and Russia. Just to go back to the US, what do you think has caused the change in North Korea's policy toward the United States? Do you think it was a breakdown of the Hanoi summit? Do you think the border closures had something to do with it? In your talking points, you mentioned self-reflection. Maybe you didn't say it during the speech, but in the talking points that you shared with me, you mentioned that it was a good time for Pyongyang to self-reflect during the near 4 years of border closures. So what again, do you think has caused the change in Pyongyang's policy toward the US? And to build on that, what do you think, what in your from your point of view, what will it take for North Korea to return to the negotiating table with the United States? So in January 2026, North Korea will probably hold a ninth party Congress. And I would think that that would be an opportunity to start on a clean slate on all policy fronts, including the economic and foreign policy fronts. Do you see Kim Jong-un ever returning to the old unification policy and accepting South Korea as part of the Korean nation? Also, maybe if you can touch on that, along with where you think North Korea will go in terms of what it'll try to aim for the next time it sits down with the US. Thank you. We can start there, I think.
Thank you so much. Many refer to Hanoi summit but that wasn't the end of the engagement between US and North Korea. I think there was one more meeting with Trump, I think, later that year, and then we had a working meeting in October. I think maybe October was the last time they actually met, like in a working session. So I was there. So I felt something, what I mentioned before, that North Korea got disappointed early, that they expected something different. That's why I'm coming back to this issue of what is the expectations when you come to the table. I mean, this is negotiation techniques. So being at the Crisis Management Institute, which is now the #1 institute in Europe on negotiations, formed by Nobel laureate Marty Ahtisaari, we talk a lot about these things. We need maybe to support parties to understand these techniques as well. So it's not just big politics. It's also a matter of that you're so different from each other when you come to the table. So maybe, okay, a new administration, since it's so close to the elections, I will not mention any names, but if there will be a new administration, let's say they will have an ambition to restart on the Korean Peninsula, it will not be that easy because of the realities right now. However, of course, US is such a big player, so you cannot ignore if US would like to open up, and there is ways of contact between North Korea and the US, I think, even as we speak, in various ways. But will there be that interest of engaging? So yes, these 3.5 years of total closure, I think North Korea felt we don't get anything out of these negotiations. And I think that's why they landed in changing the equation to something different. And now they feel that they get things from the Russia that I barely think China can give them. And Putin is playing this very, very, very skillfully, exploiting this relationship to the fullest. And I can understand that Beijing might not be too happy about what's going on. So there's no quick fix in getting back, but I think, of course, a channel of communication as a start of that kind of journey. But a new administration will also have the Middle East and Ukraine to reflect upon, and maybe it's not too much similar fire. I also want to give the other perspective. So while Kim Jong-un is signing a strategic treaty with Russia, he's probably mirror himself also in what US have been focusing on the alliance with Japan and South Korea these last couple of years. So what he's trying to do from his perspective might just be tighten up his relations so that he can counter what he sees and they see as a big threat. Long answer, too long.
No, that was great. So Kent, just going back to what you mentioned just now about North Korea, seeing the US, South Korea, and Japan stepping up their trilateral security cooperation, and perhaps that motivating Kim Jong-un on his part to seek his security partners. Would that not then make would it not then make sense for North Korea to continue to maintain good, strong relations with Beijing, if we're going by that logic? But, and I'm asking this question obviously because we're not seeing that right now. In fact, what we're seeing is a very strained relationship between Beijing and Pyongyang. So do you think Kim is simply going by his grandfather's old playbook of shuttling back and forth between China and Russia and playing them off of each other? Or do you think there's a more fundamental shift in North Korea's thinking about China? Just to share briefly my point of view as a North Korean propaganda analyst, just looking at Kim Jong-un's letters to Xi Jinping over the past year, and especially his latest two, the one he sent to Xi Jinping on the 75th founding anniversary of the PRC, and also on the 75th anniversary of the forging of relations between the DPRK and China. Those letters were so curt and cold that I would think that if I were Xi Jinping, I'd feel insulted, which makes me wonder if there's something more fundamental going on. So I just wanted to get your point of view since you've had so many interactions with the North Koreans and the Chinese.
I mean, this is not something totally new. This have occurred from time to time over the years. I must say I'm very grateful because I many times got very good briefings by China over the years. So I feel that I understand that this really goes up and down over the years. And if you look at it from a North Korean perspective, again, I think this issue about building up certain suppression and then an eagerness maybe for China to get into the game again. It's very different from the way we are doing things, but we see it again and again. If you favor one player very much, then the other don't want to be out of the game. So I think it builds up certain stress and maybe frustration that might lead to certain results which might be beneficial for North Korea. It's not easy to explain it really, but it's, I mean, here we have a Beijing, a China that is 95% of the trade, energy, and many other things, and it's really the gateway to the world. If North Korea is, I mean, the 6 kilometer or something border to Russia is nothing compared to all the things that China have done over the years, and to what China is for North Korea. So I would say that on the other hand, Russia is really doing things in a way that China cannot follow. I mean, Xi Jinping cannot fly to Pyongyang and give Kim Jong-un luxury cars. It wouldn't work in the Chinese system. And really taking them out on a journey which is very difficult. And I think there is a big frustration in China that many of these things are happening and they cannot really follow that kind of game plan.
Okay. Yeah. So I can see your point, and I agree with you fully that for now it makes sense for North Korea to align more closely with Russia because, as you've noted, Russia has more to give and is willing to go much farther than China to provide Kim Jong-un with what he wants. But I guess the one problem that I'm still kind of trying to wrap my arms around is, okay, well, if you're not getting as much from China as you are getting from Russia, that still doesn't seem to me to be good enough reason for treating China the way North Korea is, which is why I keep coming back to the question of, is there something more fundamental here than just North Korea aligning itself more closely with Russia? Because you can do that without giving China such a cold shoulder. But maybe that's a discussion for another day. And we only do have 3 minutes left. I do want to, this is not directly relevant to your speech, Kent, but I'm wondering if I can pick your brains about what happened yesterday. All North Korea watchers around the world, I'm sure, were keeping a very close eye on the North Korean parliamentary session and the outcome from it, the Supreme People's Assembly session, because Kim Jong-un back in January had asked the SPA to deliberate on new borders and removing all language in the constitution relating to South Korea and peaceful unification. There was absolute silence on South Korea and new borders yesterday, as you know. And then right after the North Korean media giving a readout on the Supreme People's Assembly session, we had a report from the Korean People's Army saying that there would be a project launched on October 9th to completely cut off roads and railways connected to the ROK. So what should we make of this, the utter silence from the SPA readout on the constitutional revision about the new borders, and then the follow-up report from the Korean People's Army? Kent, from your point of view, and anything that this, from your point of view, can shed light on the prospects of inter-Korean relations, which you touched upon briefly in your speech.
I mean, this is two different parts of the new policy and how to implement it. I think destroying roads and buildings and bridges, that is very symbolic. It's very painful, also emotionally, when you see it happening, because it's very much in your face when you see it like that. But the other one is more important. So maybe they have a stand and reflect on that part of it. I don't know. But I'm not always too concerned when monuments or other things are being destroyed, because it can be rebuilt. Those things are material things. The big changes of directions and so on is more concerning, I would say. So this is where I am right now. It's quite new, and many times when it comes to news from North Korea, you shouldn't jump to conclusions immediately. You need to see the follow-up things coming. Then you probably will understand a little bit more of the direction and the explanation. So I will hold my horses there a little bit on that one. I just wanted to shortly just say something about the China. I think there might be asks that China might not be able to or willing to give to North Korea. That might be part of that strained relation. Maybe China also, and hopefully, is maybe engaging also of not seeing the security situation deteriorate in a dangerous direction. Because as I always told Chinese officials when I have been in Beijing, I mean, they would be part of the biggest losers if something go very wrong on the Korean Peninsula. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Kent, and for sharing your insights and for speaking to us.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Ambassador Herstedt, for your for sharing your insights. Now, let's shift gears and move on to the next session. First, let me introduce the speaker and the discussant who will be exploring the role of the munitions and defense industries in the North Korean economy. Dr. Namun Cho is a senior research fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, or KAIDA. He has served at KAIDA as chair of the Committee on Future Strategic Studies, director of the Center for Security and Strategy, and chief of Defense Acquisition and Industry. Sung-Jun Bae is joining us as the discussant. He's a visiting fellow for the Stimson Center's Korea program and 38 North. He has also served in the Office of National Defense Policy and Force and Resources Management at the Ministry of National Defense of South Korea. And without further ado, Dr. Cho.
First, I want to express my gratitude to GW, the Korean Institute for Study or something, to invite me and speak about the arms industry of North Korea. Today, I want to speak three things. First, because the socialist economic all-out concentrated route was not successful, Kim Jong-un actually adjusted it and adopted a new provisional policy called tactical the Byongjin route. And second, I want to talk that the Kim Jong-un's economic reform did not significantly affect the North Korea's military industry. And last one is the North Korea, the cooperation between North Korea and Russia actually make some kinds of significant effect on the North Korea's economic system changes. Now that's the three things I'm going to talk on today. Since its establishment, the North Korean government's greatest concern has been securing national defense capabilities. It aimed to achieve security from the threat of the free world and to unify with the southern half of the Korean peninsula through force. This led to the problem of resource allocation between guns and butter. And Kim Il-sung, the first ruler of North Korea, was also aware of this problem. However, sacrificing the civilian economy in order to secure security directly tied to survival was seen as inevitable in North Korea. North Korea's survival strategy of securing security continues in the Kim Jong-un era too. This is due to the continued military confrontation with the United States and South Korea across the DMZ. In order to solve the problem of securing security, North Korea began to develop nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons development was also seen as a means to solving the problem of distorted resource allocations. When its nuclear weapons development is completed, North Korea would have deterrence against the United States, and it would no longer need to inject massive resources into a conventional arms industry. North Korea's strategy appeared successful, and Kim Jong-un declared the allocation of the resource saved in military sector to the private sector after nuclear development. Kim Jong-un, who declared the completion of nuclear development in 2017, adopted the socialist economy all-out concentration route instead of the nuclear force and economy parallel route. This declaration was made in anticipation of additional resource allocation to the civil economy and the resulting growth of the civil sector. However, this expectation fell through. This is due to the lack of economic growth in the civilian sector, despite its all-out socialist economic concentrations. North Korea's economic growth rate, estimated by the Bank of Korea, was minus 4.1% in 2018, 0.4% in 2019 and minus 4.5% in 2020, which was quite low. Kim Jong-un, who pledged to shift the resource allocation and thereby develop the civilian sector after the completion of nuclear development, had to explain these results to the people. I think this is the reason that North Korea government introduced a so-called tactical parallel route in 2020. It could be seen as an ex-post policy aimed at persuading the people. However, it is quite doubtful whether significant resources has actually been allocated to the civilian sector, and whether if they have been allocated, they actually had an effect. The reason for this are as follows. First, the North Korea's resource allocation to the military industry has already been decreasing since around 2014, when North Korea's conventional weapons were almost acquired. So there were not many additional resources that North Korea could transfer to the civilian sector around 2017. Second, it was difficult to convert the resources to the civilian sector because the demand for missiles other than conventional weapons increased rapidly. Third, North Korea's lack of infrastructures limit their outcome of civilian sector investment. For this reason, North Korea had no choice but to introduce the tactical parallel route to hide its policy failure. It is believed that Kim Jong-un's economic reform did not significantly affect the military industry. This is because military enterprises, which are budgeted and planned enterprises, still use national indicators, allocate raw and subsidiary materials from the government, and receive rations. In particular, in an environment where the state is the only buyer for the products produced by weapons enterprises, except for their some 8.3 products, it was not possible for the military industry to participate in the market. As the market was revitalized, the military factories were exposed to decline in number of workers. But this is also did not cause significant problems due to the reduction in demand in the military industry. Therefore, it can be said that the military sector was at a certain distance from the economic reforms of the Kim Jong-un era. Due to the lack of demand for conventional weapons, munitions factories that experienced a decrease in factory utilization rate and decrease in rations were exposed to be a relatively worse environment than the civilian sector's business responsibility system companies that benefit from Kim Jong-un's reform. Kim Jong-un's order to support the civilian sector based on the socialist economy all-out concentrated route and the increase in missile subsystems and parts production at other munitions factories due to the increase in production in the missile sector played a role in easing the shortage of demand at munitions factories in North Korea. North Korea's arms export to Russia provide opportunity to recover from the shortage of demand in military plants. While Russia's demand for weapons was concentrated in the ammunition and missile sectors, productions in areas such as military supplies also increased. However, the increase in arms export to Russia seems to have caused several ripple effects on the North Korean economy. First, labor shortage, which had not been a problem when there was a lack of demand for conventional weapons, began to emerge as a significant problem due to the increase in output of the military industry nowadays. Second, when the foundation of the North Korean socialist system was shaken by the influx of external motives, grains acquired as a counter benefit for arms export to Russia made it possible for the North Korean authorities to attempt to control the distribution of grain that is determined by the market. Recently, North Korea authorities has been directly operating a grain sales office, selling grains to the people at a price just below the market price. It is an attempt at introducing a government's grain monopoly system, as the North Korean government is seen to have laid the foundation for controlling the distribution of grains through grains imported from Russia. However, the introduction of this new system inevitably resulted in a relative reduction in benefits for workers in public sectors. This is because while the public sector workers were able to purchase food at a lower price than at the market, the ration amount was reduced. North Korean authorities have implemented a wage increase for public sector workers to compensate for the reduction in benefits for workers in the public sector. As a result, public sector workers now receive greater benefits as they are able to purchase food and government-run grain stores with increased wages. They receive significant benefits compared to civilian sector workers who are estimated to have not had a wage increase. This kind of a system change in North Korea actually has some controversial dispute because we don't have enough observation that the North Korean government actually made whether they make a lot of the grain stores, public grain stores in North Korea, or the that grain stores they are just the public sector, both public sector and private sector can use the grain stores. It is not confirmed yet. However, I believe that this kind of change is can be possible because of the import of grains from North Korea among through the North Korea and Russia the corporations. It can be assumed that these new attempts by the North Korean authority inevitably caused the increase in labor supply to the public sector enterprise, including military factories. This is because public sector employees as 8.3 workers returning to the public sector factories, such as military factories, emerges as a way to receive greater benefits in a stable manner than participate in market activities without going to the factory. So I insist that some short-term labor demand, shorter labor supply in military industry actually compensated, restored because of more wage in military factories nowadays. And I think of that can be possible because of North Korea and Russia, the military cooperation. In conclusion, it is judged that North Korea seeks not only the direct effect of economic revitalization through arms export to Russia, but also additional indirect effects such as restoring the social economy through pressuring the market economy, controlling the grain distribution network, and increasing military industry production by securing military factory workers. Actually, North Korean economist in South Korea talks about the many ironical things in North Korea nowadays because we can explain that based on their previous theories or some kinds of experience. We think of there some kinds of a big jump in the foreign currency exchange rate, or the very relative stable price systems in North Korea. We think there is some kinds of the system change is going on in North Korea, so we can explain using the previous theory or experience, something like that. So that I insist that we should consider the the framework for the North Korean economy, including the military sectors. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. Your analysis of kind of a new economic framework in North Korea, thanks to their new relationship with Russia, sounds very interesting, and I think we have more time to discuss that topic. Let me ask Sungjun to make some comments on Dr. Cho's presentation.
First of all, I would like to sincerely thank Professor Kim for inviting me. I also want to express my gratitude to Senior Fellow Cho for delivering excellent presentation. I fully agree with his perspective. I think this article is very insightful and well analyzed. As he pointed out, the North Korea's second economy is major issues distorting its overall economy. North Korea's second economy, also known as the military economy, operates independently from the national economy. It's hidden from the public and the world because it's mainly used for military purposes. In a way, this is expected because the North Korea legend is military-oriented. All of Jong-un Kim power lies with military. While other socialist countries have similar systems, North Korea's second economy stands out because it plays a crucial role in supporting the national economy and directly reflects Jong-un Kim's priorities. However, North Korea's official defense budget doesn't fully reveal important part of its economy. In 2023, North Korea announced that its defense budget is about 15.9% of the total budget. However, most experts believe this only represents a small portion of the actual operating and maintenance costs. It doesn't include the spending on defense improvement, like buy new weapon or research and other development. Additionally, North Korea has never disclosed how much it spends on the developing its nuclear weapons. This shows us just how much more money is being allocated to the second economy compared to the civilian economy. Therefore, life is becoming more difficult for ordinary people in North Korea. Also, North Korea has another reason to be forced to focus on military economy because weapons made in its military factories are exported to the Russia, Middle East, and Africa, providing a major source of income. According to a senior fellow Cho presentation, North Korea and Russia are cooperating for short-term gains. I would like to hear his opinion as he is an expert in this field. Given the awkward relationship with China, could North Korea and Russia develop a long-term partnership? I believe Russia's involvement could offer North Korea an opportunity to address some of these economic challenges. This is because North Korean military industry has a strong production capabilities, making it appealing for reconstruction efforts even after Russia war ends. Would you just give me some comment?
Okay. Actually, you know, one year the Secretary of Defense, Russia's Secretary of Defense, visited North Korea. He insisted the China and North Korea should have the trilateral, the joint the exercise, but China did not respond at all. So the military cooperation between Russia and the North Korea is going well, but the military the cooperation between China and the North Korea is not going well. By the way, just the ambassador Canton talked about the recently the China actually just confiscated some commodities, Kim Jong-un's commodities from the China to North Korea, and they tried to set up the border barriers between Chinese and North Korean borders. So we can conjecture that their relation was not that good. I think this will go in a significant period of time. I don't think if the Ukraine and Russia war is over. I don't think the cooperation between North Korea and Russia is not go well, because the main interest, the main the items that Russia interested is just the munitions. And so the Russia, I think I guess that they because they cooperate with North Korea because they need the ammunitions, and they just break all the UN systems that actually they contributed to be found. So I don't think in the long term, the Russian and North Korean the cooperation is not going to continue.
Okay. Based on the senior fellow Joe insights, I would like to share my thoughts on the recently relationships between North Korea and Russia. By mid-year, South Korea and the US confirmed that North Korea had sent around 10,000 containers to Russia. Recently, satellite data from the UK and the US showed that a lot of containers have reached the front lines in Ukraine. Actually, I think the key to understanding whether these relationships will be short-term or long-term lies in what Russia has offered and what it will provide in return to North Korea. According to data from China, as you mentioned, energy cooperation was a key focus of the economic provisions in the treaty signed between Russia and North Korea in June. This can predict that North Korea has secured, oil, gas, and coal deals from Russia for missile and nuclear weapon development, because they emphasize about economic cooperations. And also another provision mentioned the strengthening cooperations in science, referring to technologies, innovation, and high-tech joint development. This also implies that North Korea may have been provided with missile and satellite technologies that it can't use. There is one example to explain this. Last year, North Korea attempted to launch its military spy satellite. It's called Cholima, twice in May and August, but both failed. After Jong-un Kim's visit to Russia in September, however, the successful November launch has important implications. For China, I think that the close cooperation between Russia and North Korea provides an opportunity to counter the US together in Northeast Asia area. So China will keep thinking about how to take advantage of this situation. Like Senior Fellow Joe pointed out in his your presentation, North Korea cooperation with Russia seems to be working well so far. Yeah, I agree, because Russia has lifted the freeze on North Korea funds. Additionally, Russia oppositions in the UN has made it difficult to enforce and monitor sanctions against North Korea. According to the analysis by the UK-based conflict armament research, 90% of the electronic components found in North Korean missiles used by Russia came from our allies, including the US, Singapore, Japan, almost 26 countries. Because of sanctions restricting access to missile parts, North Korea is illegally transshipping goods in international waters. To secure the necessary components and has set up subsidiaries in China, Russia, and several African countries for trade. This indicated that North Korea has already effectively evaded our control and the surveillance through various means. So I want to emphasize that if the international society doesn't act to prevent this, North Korea could become a tool for dictatorships like Russia. So I think eventually we risk losing control of the war in Russia and missing the chance to limit North Korea growing nuclear and missile capabilities. Therefore, we need to raise awareness of these issues and seek solutions, such as tightening international sanctions and controlling export among our allies. I'm also interested in hearing Senior Fellow Joe's perspective on this point of view. That's all I want to say today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sung-jun. I think we have enough time to listen to Nam-hoon's respond to your question. But in the interest of time, let me move on to the next topic. The next topic we are going to discuss is evolving North Korea-Russia relations and their potential impact on North Korea-China economic relations, which I think Nam-hoon and Sung-jun very eloquently highlighted, and they just made the introduction for us. The speaker is Chu-ping Hu, a senior fellow at the East Asian International Relations Caucus in Malaysia. She also serves as a visiting fellow at the Institute of International Relations at National Chengchi University in Taiwan. And she's a member of the Asia-Pacific Nuclear Advisory Panel with the British American Security Information Council. And Troy Stangaron is joining us as a discussant. He's the director of the Hyundai Motor Korea Foundation Center for Korean History and Public Policy, and the deputy director of the Indo-Pacific program at the Wilson Center. He also co-chairs the North Korea Economic Forum at GWIX with Rachel. Today is his official first day in this role. Congratulations, Troy. And now let me turn it over to Chu-ping.
Thank you so much, Yong-ho, for your very kind introduction. I would like to thank GWIX for inviting me to be part of this conference. So many apologies for my very late preparation. So to start off, I would like to highlight that Russia-North Korea relations has not been constant, just like North Korea's relations with China has ever evolving, ever changing under the different leadership and also under the different geopolitical shift and timeline. So when Russia and North Korea began to considering the bilateral relationship, it began, we all know that at the end of the Cold War era, so Russia actually turned all of its Cold War financial assistance to North Korea into debts. And then Russia also established diplomatic relations with South Korea, of which North Korea considered Russia has betrayed the socialist camaraderie between them. So when Russia was focusing on post-Cold War economic reconfiguration, North Korea has to survive on its own, and we all know that it suffered from a famine during the mid-1990s. When Vladimir Putin came into power since the early 2000s, there were planning of re-strategizing the role of North Korea and Korean Peninsula as a whole. South Korea has emerged to become a very important economic partner for Russia. But Putin does have a grand strategy of how to link Russia's and Trans-Siberia network with the Korean Peninsula. And of course, again, South Korea was the main target of the strategy. And therefore, North Korea do realize that they have lower in importance not only with Russia, with China, but also with many of the former socialist and communist partners, countries, who also at the same time begin to strengthen their economic relations with South Korea. So North Korea is strategic to Russia due to its connection to the Northern Pacific through the Rason or Rajin Songbong area. So acting as a buffer against US allies in Northeast Asia, which immediately bordering North Korea, and that is, and they are South Korea and Japan. When China led the Six-Party Talks initiative starting in 2003, Russia decided that they wanted to be part of the stakeholder. They weren't part of the Four-Party Talks negotiation during the first North Korean nuclear crisis in the 1990s. So afterwards, when I interviewed the Russian policymakers and specialists who were involved in the consultation of the Six-Party Talks, they remain and insisted that Six-Party Talks model is very crucial for bringing stability and denuclearization of North Korea up until 2019, actually. So, but not only Russia joined China in condemning North Korea's first nuclear test in 2006, they also supported the United Nations Security Council resolution, passing the resolution in sanctioning North Korea. So there are many layers of how distrust has been built up between Russia and North Korea, and also between Russia and China as well. So both Russia and China strongly believe in the denuclearized North Korea for the longest time. So that is why when Kim Jong-il passed away in December 2011, when Kim Jong-un came into power in early 2012, he immediately rejected all kinds of engagement. So there were several instances when we noticed that politically, Kim Jong-un is not managing the leader-to-leader relationship very well, including with Xi Jinping and also Putin. So it was no surprise that when Rachel Lee shared that the most recent letter from Kim Jong-un to Xi Jinping show how disrespectful Kim Jong-un can be. So it all has been rooted in how North Korea perceive its geostrategic position, which is a less geo-economic partner in comparison to South Korea, and that both China and Russia has underestimated North Korea's potential, especially under Kim Jong-un's leadership, to disrupt the geostrategic development, not only in Northeast Asia, but also in terms of global sanctions regime, and now evolving to the current Russia-Ukraine war scenario, and it continue and prove itself to be an important actor. So the bilateral relations has suffered many ups and downs. So during the summit diplomacy of 2018, Russia actually did not receive a very warm welcome or there is no cordial. What was being portrayed in the media was not reported as so in local media, not only in Russia, but also in China, actually. So that actually also planted another seed of distrust between Russia and North Korea. Thereby, we witnessed the disrespectful treatment of a Russian diplomat during the pandemic, of which the diplomats and the family members have to paddle their way out of North Korea to reach the Russian border. The positive signs only started to show when North Korea celebrated the 70th anniversary commemorating the end of Korean War in July 2023 last year, when both Russia and China were invited to join to commemorate the event. If you study about the news coverage during this time in North Korea, Russian delegation received much more coverage. The minister, Sergei, received much more highlights in the media. And even though China is represented by one of its high-ranking officer, a member of the standing member of the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party. However, it was always casted in the background or taken from a faraway view rather than a close-up like what has been portrayed between Kim Jong-un and the Russian minister. So, and that paved way for Kim Jong-un's high-profile visit to Russia in September 2023. So, which is 2 months after the commemoration event in Pyongyang. So the visit was quite comprehensive in the way that Kim actually brought along the defense and the foreign ministry delegation. So the Putin was also reportedly welcoming Kim Jong-un in breaking its fashion in which he would be appearing late or such, but it doesn't occur during that September 2023 visit. So this was the time when the Russian Koreans especially started to notice a change in Putin's tone towards North Korea, and they have reports and analyses being published towards the end of 2023, indicating a potential upgrade in bilateral relations between Russia and North Korea. So true enough, in June 2024 this year, we saw the announcement of the signing of the Treaty of Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the Russian Federation and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So there were now a debate among various researchers and analysts about what does the mutual security assistance mean to both sides. It was the Russian researcher that pointed out Kim Jong-un characterized the upgrade in this relationship as a form of alliance, but Putin mentioned nothing about being an alliance. So this is a kind of a political signal that they send to each other, but also to the rest of the world. And how we are going to read that would depend on how much substantive actions and plans would be implemented between the both sides. So I think Senior Fellow Cho just now has highlighted how this may be a kind of a short-term partnership, of which I agree, because the basis for trust has not been solidified yet. So both sides need to prove that they can do more, especially in terms of securing ammunition from North Korea to Russia. It has to be dependent on how Russia can assist North Korea in setting up such facility to produce the amount, quantity and quality of the ammunition that can be used on the battlefield. So just now, the discussant Bay has also mentioned about the report of US ROK confirmed the 1,000 container shipment from North Korea to Russia. It was only reported by US and ROK government in news, but never been confirmed by other research organizations that rely on satellite imagery. So I have my reservation about this report, and therefore we are yet to see to what extent the real military cooperation would be formed after the CSP treaty upgrade between the two. So it is clear that there are strategic objectives that Putin and Kim is trying to achieve. So firstly, Russia needs to carve more additional strategic space due to the over-reliance on China after the Ukraine war. So Russia is heavily sanctioned by global community. We cannot use SWIFT code to transfer money directly to Russian banks. So it was reported that Russia needs to download Chinese banking apps to conduct transactions, and they need to rely on brokers and third party in China to facilitate their trade. At the very beginning, they don't have to do so because there were difficulty for European countries to immediately shift away from Russia's energy supply. But now that pressure is mounting as European countries already identify ways to diversify away their dependency on Russia. So Russia now also began to try to diversify away from the way it has been dependent on China on the onset of sanctions. Likewise, North Korea is equally, if not more, heavily sanctioned, definitely more actually. So after the pandemic outbreak, North Korea also heavily dependent on China. Reportedly, probably more than 90% of the GDP right now would be coming from China. So when I wanted to see the latest update from Chinese side, so I checked their bank, the Ministry of Commerce, Department of Statistics. So China has already released the latest statistic of trade and investment with South Korea, but none came up when I tried to search for North Korea. So it's increasing difficult for us to gauge the extent of dependency for both Russia and North Korea onto China. And that could be the breaking point of which, or a strong indicator for us to see the extent of interdependency between these three actors. So China could have the upper hand. So the geo-economic importance of Russia, North Korea has been minimal since the very beginning. Because North Korea is very well aware that both Russia and China try to secure as many critical mineral from North Korea. And the rapid nuclear and missile system development under Kim Jong-un's means that both China and Russia already realized that they cannot, it is almost impossible to nuclearize North Korea by the mid-2010s. So, in order to secure more trust from North Korea, Russia already began to resume oil exports to North Korea, one of the sanctioned commodity under the United Nations sanctions regime, which is now gone. So there are resumptions of special economic zone, especially in Razon, where Russia reportedly wanted to revive the train tracks between Vladivostok and also Razon. And Tumen River Economic Development Plan was something that was proposed by China in the mid-1990s to help North Korea to overcome the economic crisis that they experienced at the time, and of which Russia is also part of the investor and stakeholder. China is also the first internet provider to North Korea. Russia began to offer internet connection alternative to North Korea, I think around 2012, 2014, but there were no follow-up whether such telecommunication structure will be maintained. So trade between Russia and North Korea, we could expect that remain minimal, especially compared to China and North Korea. So when I try to search for the Chinese resources on the revival of the special economic zone investment, there was, so this year was supposed to be friendship year between China and North Korea. So it was mentioned in January. The second update was in April, made unilaterally by China. And again in July, during the commemoration of the end of the Korean War. So when September, during North Korea's National Day, Xi Jinping sent a congratulatory message to DPRK and Kim Jong-un and mentioned again the importance of this year and that they are commemorating the year of friendship between the two countries. And just last week, so when China was celebrating its National Day, North Korea, so Kim Jong-un sent a congratulatory message without mentioning the year of friendship between China and North Korea. So we have reason to believe that Kim Jong-un is very well aware of the Xi Jinping's disdain over Kim Jong-un when both of them rise into power between 2012 and 2013. And Xi Jinping also reportedly very much discontent over North Korea under Kim Jong-un's leadership from 2012 to 2014, because even though China tries to continue trade with North Korea, but North Korea did not reciprocate with a more cordial political relationship. So Xi Jinping, therefore, due to the accumulation of dissatisfaction with North Korea action, including the 2016 nuclear test, which was conducted over the Lunar New Year, of which I heard that Chinese officials have to rush back from their hometown to Beijing to convene emergency meetings. So China's displeasure over North Korea only getting higher. So China under Xi Jinping imposed sanctions onto North Korea for the first time in 2017, and that also sowed the seed of distrust between, especially from North Korea towards China. So right now, the focus would be, I think we can pay attention to whether the Tumen River economic cooperation between the three countries would truly resume. Ship-to-ship transfer has been noticed between China, North Korea, and also Russia, North Korea. So it was NK Pro that reported the Chinese ship can be detected directly at the North Korean port, including at Nampo. So we are yet to see whether that would be developed into something more substantive and meaningful, which is closer to North Korean coast on the other side of the on the east coast of North Korea, which would provide direct access to China and Russia to the Pacific Ocean, of which it would impose direct strategic threat to Japan as well. So I would like to conclude that Russia has increasingly become dependent on China. Therefore, there is this multiple layer of complication due to the long history of political distrust, and but China has always been a trustable economic and aid and investment partner to both Russia and North Korea. So it would be dependent on whether North Korea can navigate this carefully to reap the benefits from the two great powers. With that, I end my remarks. Thank you so much, and I look forward to more questions and comments.
Thank you, Chiping, for your comprehensive analysis of the North Korea-Russia relationship and the China factor here. Now let me turn it over to Troy for his comments on Chiping's presentation.
Well, thank you, Yan-Ho, and thank you for your kind introduction. It's good to be co-chair with Rachel. I'm looking forward to she and I working together and building on what Bill has done over the last 3 years. So I think one of the things that Chiping said towards the end of her remarks is something that we need to hone in on, which is whether it's the Tumen River project or something else, one of the challenges we face in sort of understanding the North Korea-Russia relationship right now, or how China fits into this, is there really is a lack of real hard details. We can start sort of scoping things. I think there are ways we can frame what's going on, and I want to introduce one of those in a moment. But, you know, there's great difficulty here. It's not just that, you know, China may be starting to slow down its reporting of data on trade with North Korea, but you know, Russia now is only reporting high-level numbers, and for a while they didn't report any data. And so there's a real sort of gap in kind of what is going on and what we can actually look at and try to even analyze. And so, you know, when we think about this, one of the things that I think has gone through every discussion from Ambassador Harset, you know, this morning or earlier to, you know, the first paper from Dr. Cho, and now is this idea of, you know, what is the sustainability of this relationship? How long will it last? You know, is it something that's bound by the war in Ukraine? Is it something that could perhaps last longer? And I want to reframe that, because I think in some ways that's not the way we should look at this question. The real question is, you know, because there will be a significant change in the relationship between North Korea and Russia when the war in Ukraine ends, regardless of whether there's still a good relationship between North Korea and Russia afterwards, is what does the environment, the geopolitical environment, the broader economic environment look like when that war ends? And the reason I say it is I think there's certain things that we know will be the case when that ends. The members of the UN panel of experts, now that it's been disbanded, have been more frank in their comments of sort of where sanctions were. And one of the things we know is that at least since shortly after the failure of the summit meeting in Hanoi, that Russia and China have stopped enforcing UN sanctions. I don't think when the war in Ukraine ends, Russia is likely to go back to enforcing UN sanctions. So this changes the broader economic environment. And so, you know, one of the things, Chuping, that I think would be interesting to get into for your paper is what does this mean in terms of if we look back at trade data from China, from Russia, what types of goods might they be now more willing to export to North Korea? Not necessarily even in terms of things that are dual use, but just because you had a lot of sectoral sanctions in place that they wouldn't have been while they were enforcing sanctions up into the lead up into Hanoi. So, I mean, this is one of the areas where I think both the bilateral relationship between North Korea and Russia will change, and that change will survive, and also one area where it might change with China as well. And so it's something to look at in terms of how that goes. And when we sort of dig into this deeper, there's this question of, how large is the relationship with North Korea and Russia? And so the statistic I have seen is that the Russians are reporting that last year their bilateral trade with North Korea was $34 million. It's not really much compared to the trading relationship with China, but I suspect much of that took place after the meeting between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin last September. So in that context, the number this year, which I haven't seen any data for, could be relatively larger. And one of the things that I am going to take and try and put this in context, the way I think about this is, Dr. Bay had pointed out, the estimates that are public in terms of how many containers of artillery have been seen via satellite. There's rough estimates through February of this year. It was that basically North Korea shipped around 3 million artillery shells to Russia. The types of shells are believed to be 152 millimeter shells. There is public information that it costs Russia roughly $1,000 domestically to produce 152 millimeter shell. In that broader context, that starts giving us a balance for what the economic value of the relationship might be. I'm highly skeptical that the Russians are paying the North Koreans the equivalent to what it costs them to domestically produce artillery shells. But even if you found this down at, say, 50% of what it costs the Russians, that means that roughly there's some type of economic exchange going on that from roughly, September of last year to February of this year was probably worth about $1.5 billion. So then the question becomes, what is North Korea getting in exchange for that? If the trade side of that the Russians are willing to report was only around 34 million, that suggests a lot of those funds are going into something else, rather than purchases of grain, oil, these types of things. Now, of course, the Russians may not be wanting to put everything on the books as well, so maybe some of that is still commodities for the North Korean economy. But then this gets into what I think Dr. Cho pointed out in his paper, sort of how is this influx of funds either to the military economy or the economy more broadly, then funneling into North Korea in terms of how it is taking and boosting production, boosting sales of other goods. And so these are all questions to look at, and where then does that fit China? Because one of the things, and I need to look into this more deeply, if you look at Chinese trade statistics, that stands out is after Kim met with Putin, you see a significant drop in imports from China of fertilizer, grains, and a couple other products, all of which are things that Russia produces easily and is a world leader in, would be easy for Russia to provide. So are we seeing a reorientation of relationship to where Russia is providing certain key commodities to where it has a comparative advantage to North Korea, now in exchange for artillery? In the future, these may all taper off as funds dry down and there's not artillery needed to be exported. But we could still see, because North Korea has an interest in not being dependent on China, North Korea tried to maintain that relationship, to maintain a little bit of balance and not being completely dependent on China for supplies. So I think there are certain things that we can start looking at and seeing in terms of how this relationship might develop, where it might go. And, there are, I think, other reasons to suggest this relationship could, at least through the medium term, survive. There are certain areas to where they share interests. Xu Ping talked about sort of the financial difficulties. Well, Russia and China have been working on ways, something that North Korea shares an interest in, to try and develop means of financial transactions that are outside the US dollar system, so that way they can avoid US sanctions and avoid the United States tracking what transactions are going on. these are interests that are going to be shared even after the war ends. They have geopolitical interests in terms of wanting to see a different geopolitical order. The United States is working more closely with South Korea and Japan to try and take and deal with changing geopolitics within the region. It wouldn't surprise me if North Korea is viewing these situations similarly and asking, how does it take and do that? Russia as well. And so there are different forces, be they geopolitical, be they related to the financial system and sanctions, that are going to drive them to continue to watch and work with each other. And so I do think, once the war in Ukraine ends, that relationship changes because there will be different needs and different circumstances. But I also think, we need to be cognizant that we're not simply going to go back to 2019 or something, that sanctions will not be in place. They will share interest in maintaining economic ties, potentially security ties. Those may change due to other unforeseen circumstances, such as how does the war end in Ukraine? What happens with the Europeans? Do they maintain sanctions? There's a lot of evidence that Russia is looking to reorient its entire economy away from Europe and towards Asia, which would make North Korea a more attractive, even if still perhaps a minor partner. So I think a lot of these shifts suggest that when the war ends, that this relationship will look different, but that there will be a basis for a relationship going forward. And so I think in that context, asking what then does that relationship in the context of North Korea's relationship with China, specifically on the economic front, is important. It's one I know that because, as I said, there's not a lot of hard data on this that's difficult to look at, but I think we can start conceptualizing what that might look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy, for pointing out the very important topics that we should think about. And I think Chu-Ping has something to respond to Troy's comments. Do you have any?
Yeah, just briefly. So thank you so much, Troy, for your comments. I think some of them are very useful in helping me to clarify further. So, so what is exported to North Korea with the latest available data is that it used to be more diverse in terms of the types of goods. Now it generally reduced to 2 or 3 main types, and that includes raw materials and also grains. So for Russia, it's mainly about oil. And as for what does North Korea get from having deepened its relationship with Russia is that learning the how to bypass the sanctions regime. So you have mentioned that. And also China would try to introduce minimal punitive punishment as a signaling of its dissatisfaction whenever North Korea tried to deviate from its alignment with China. So I think it would be useful if I could introduce some more conceptual framework to frame how this narrative would go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chu-Ping. Let me invite Nam-Hoon and Sung-Jun for a brief roundtable discussion. Let me ask Nam-Hoon if he has anything to respond to Sung-Jun's comments and the discussion between Chu-Ping and Troy.
Yeah, I want to ask to Chu-Ping. She talked about there some future some cooperation around the Tumen area. Among the China, Russia, and North Korea. My question is, first, actually, the sanction against the North Korea is still working. Then the most of the transaction among 3 countries will break the UN sanctions. Because any trade, any bulk money cannot be allowed in sanction systems. So do you think the China and Russia will ignore the sanction, the existing sanction, when they are trying to do promote some economic behavior around the Tumen area? Second, the cooperation around Tumen area. South Korea is their main player because Russia is very interested in to supply to build up the gas pipeline through the Siberia to South Korea, and to establish the railroad, Trans-Siberian the railroad through the North Korea and up to down to South Korea. So in my knowledge, the Russia really seek to promote that one, but under the sanction regimes that I just talked about, the South Korea never tried to join that Toman area the corporations. Then do you think after the Ukraine war, the Russia will be interested in the Toman area cooperation without South Korea? That's my question.
So I should just respond very quickly. So thank you so much for your questions. So firstly, the Tumen Economic Development Area has been reframed several times because China proposed it and Russia become a semi-permanent partner. And in fact, it was Russia-North Korea border will meet first before China's China will meet first, and then it would be Russia and North Korea on the end of that area. So reportedly, China actually needs approval from Russia and North Korea so that it can access at the more downstream part of the river, and there was a agreement already being provided China the right to sell its ship down the river. However, because of the infrastructure in that the river mouth area that couldn't allow Chinese heavier ton ship to pass through, so China actually proposed to demolish the bridge and rebuild and expand the river mouth. However, Russia and North Korea has no response to that. So this is a difficulty in which China trying to secure greater access in that area. So Russia, it is already part of the Tumen Economic Development Project. As for the sanctions regime, I think for now, due to how involved South Korea as a proxy in supporting US allies in the war in Ukraine. So I think Putin does begin to strategize to move away from further engagement with South Korea in that regard. So they will proceed just among the three of them without involving South Korea.
So just jumping in on the sanctions and whether Russia and China would move forward with the Tumen River project with sanctions in place. I think in the case of Russia, and it's clear from the broader relationship with North Korea right now, the violations they're doing in terms of labor, in terms of munitions, in terms of financial aspects, that Russia has no problem with sanctions. As I mentioned, the UN panel members have said that the Russians are no longer enforcing sanctions. So I don't think that's an issue. I think the real question is on China. The panel members have also mentioned in their public statements that China is no longer enforcing sanctions. But would they want to be so public and so blatant about doing so? I wonder if China might be more comfortable simply allowing things across its border. So I think the Chinese might still be reluctant, but I don't think there'd be any issue with the Russians.
Okay. I think we all, I mean, today, including Ambassador Herstedt, we are in a kind of a consensus that the current relationship or the evolving relationship between North Korea and Russia seems to be a transactional. But as Troy allocated, and also Seongjun, I think you mentioned this, there should be some kind of a deep cooperation between North Korea and Russia that may have some long-term lasting impact on the geopolitical environment in Northeast Asia. And also sanctions regime is not working anymore. Putin, when he signed the recent treaty with Kim Jong-un, Russia, I think, just made it official that they will shield North Korea from any kind of international sanctions. So I think the next question would be, then what? I mean, we already have a trilateral cooperation strengthened between among the U.S., South Korea, and Japan. But with this new development in Northeast Asia, what should be the trilateral response in the future? And we have a very big political event in the United States, the presidential elections in early November. So, anybody, you have any comments on that?
I mean, I think it has to be more than a trilateral response. As Sung-Jun pointed out, the analysis of North Korean missile use in Ukraine is that the vast majority of the parts come from basically microelectronics firms in Europe, the United States, and other allies and partners. And so part of this is, working with allies and partners to cut off the supply chains that North Korea has developed. There are certain things we're not going to be able to do, but it's also about building a new way to take and address the UN sanctions question. So whether that is something through the UN General Assembly, has someone proposed, whether that is building a broader coalition of countries, some of that is going to be going to countries and doing what we did even when sanctions were enforced, and pointing out this is how they're violating sanctions. This is where you're going wrong. There'll be a lot of countries who won't care now. They'll simply say, well, it doesn't matter anymore, it's dead rip. But it's going to be doing a combination of all these things. So it has to be more than trilateral, because that simply won't be effective at the end of the day. You were muted, Yan-Ho.
Now you go first.
Okay. After the UN expert panels extension of UN expert panel failed, some countries like United States and Japan and Korea and the European countries tried to set up establish new kinds of almost similar the institution like the expert panel. But I don't know that's going well or not. But we have to try to establish that as soon as possible. Second one is that, as you know, the Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, they insist that the Asian countries should set up their new kinds of alliance system like a NATO collective systems. I don't agree with him, but some kinds of the hub and spoke system between the U.S., Japan, and U.S. and Korea should be adjusted to some kinds of trilateral or something like that one. Actually, I insist that why don't the United States and Korea and Japan has have same the extended deterrence systems? So why don't three countries join together and have the common extended deterrence system? Try to discuss together also the extended promote and extended deterrence systems among three countries. So we have to think about the new ways of alliance system in the future.
Thank you. Sung-Jun?
Just I want to make some short comment. Some people say international sanctions don't have much impact, but without them, the situation in North Korea would likely be much worse. So we must focus on the implementing more effective and practical sanctions rather than just relying on policy measures. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Bill Brown has something to discuss with us. He's the one who handed down the crown of the chair of the North Korean Economic Forum to Troy and Rachel. So, Bill, I think we have 2 more minutes left. Can you turn on your camera?
Well, let me just ask my question.
Okay, yes.
It's a question for anybody, but the last North Korean nuclear test was what, 8-9 years ago? I'm wondering if the anyone thinks here that there's some kind of a red line. I kind of think there's a red line that either China and Russia or both, they really jumped on board these sanctions with that last nuclear test, which is probably a hydrogen bomb, very big North Korean test. The Russians and the Chinese then jumped on board the sanctions. I have a hard time believing either Russia or China really want North Korea to have big nuclear capability. So does anybody think there's some kind of a red line that they've told North Korea no more testing?
Yes,
I'll
Chip?
start. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, she raised her hand first.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think so it was from the Chinese report that I noticed that during the last nuclear test in 2017, there were radiation leakage detected over the North Korea-China border. So Russia also expressed their concern. So both China and Russia actually provided a technical team to North Korea and to advise them don't either try to set up a new tunnel for nuclear tests or stop nuclear testing. So over the pandemic, there were some online meetings between them. So Russian embassy in Pyongyang always publicized what they were talking about and what kind of meeting was it. So one of it is really about the nuclear safety team discussion was being held in 2020. So we have strong reason to believe that North Korea cannot provide the kind of assurance that radiation would not leak again when they conduct the next test, and therefore the moratorium on nuclear tests has still been observed until now. Thank you so much.
Good to know that. Troy and then Namhoon. Troy, you go first.
I'll just say briefly, on the lack of a test, I think we probably overestimated they were going to do a test earlier. That's partially why we haven't seen one. But I think more broadly, some of the conversation that I'm starting to hear now is not a question of whether Russia or China are interested in having with denuclearized, but how the United States deals with three nuclear powers who may coordinate their efforts. And so I think, at least on the US side, that's where the conversation is starting to go.
Thank you. Namhoon?
Okay, I talked with the Chinese red line against North Korea, and he told Bruce Bennett, and the Bruce Bennett told me that one of his students write down the dissertation that actually the reason that North Korea has more nuclear weapons than they need for against the United States and South Korea is because to think about the aiming that one to the China in the future. So I think their red line in the future is the significant amount of nuclear weapons, and they are aiming the implicitly or explicitly aiming that to China. They actually, if they think about their only the United States, second straight capability is much more important than the amount of nuclear weapons.
Thank you. I think we have already run out of time. We are actually a couple of minutes over. I'd like to thank all the distinguished speakers for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank the GWIC's team, Takara and Ravina, for putting this together. And of course, thank you all for joining us. With that, let me close today's panel discussion. Thank you.